This painting depicts the Incredulity of St. Thomas by the Italian artist Caravaggio. The event is found only in John's Gospel, in John chapter 20, and has been depicted in art since at least the 5th century. In the Bible, it happens just over a week after Jesus' resurrection.
Now Thomas, also known as the twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed."
The Greek word for not believing is often translated as doubt, as it is here. But doubt isn't the same as not believing, nor is doubt the opposite of faith. All 4 Gospels include stories of the disciples being afraid, doubting, of not believing, of being confused and astonished. After the resurrection, Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus. She thought he was a gardener. Nor was she allowed to touch him, unlike Thomas here. In Luke's Gospel, when Jesus appeared after his death, the disciples were terrified and thought he was a ghost. The Emmaus disciples walked 12 miles with Jesus without recognizing him. And we've just heard that the doors were locked. Of what or whom were the disciples afraid?
In the history of Christian thought, Thomas has often been judged by his lack of faith rather than by his honesty. Yet he only asked for what the other disciples had already experienced. If suddenly it was announced that Jesus is about to turn up wherever we are now, if we thought this might actually be true, surely our first instinct would be to turn around and see for ourselves. To want to see Jesus again is not about doubt, but about relationship.
So when Thomas says he won't believe unless he sees and touches Jesus for himself, what he's saying is that he wants his own experience and relationship with Jesus. Don't we also? Yet, as we hear later in this passage, Thomas doesn't need to touch Jesus after all. He only needs to see and hear him. Because when he does, he exclaims, "My Lord and my God." It never says that Thomas did touch Jesus and only then believe. This declaration of faith is unique. No other disciple in any of the Gospels expresses their faith in Christ in this way. When Simon Peter says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," this isn't the same as saying, "My Lord and my God." This is more radical, more personal, and it connects the beginning of John's Gospel with its end, because the Word that became flesh and dwelt amongst us happens right again here after his resurrection.
Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." While this seems as if Jesus is asserting the significance of those who have faith without needing physical evidence, he was keen to show Thomas his wound and let him feel it. Jesus isn't a resurrected ghost of his former body. He really was present in his flesh, enabling this extraordinary miracle to take place. And this has been commonly interpreted as biblical encouragement to benefit from physical experiences in our faith, such as pilgrimages, the veneration of holy relics, and the contemplation of religious art. Whereas we might tend to think this new beatitude of Jesus, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed," snubs Thomas's faith, in fact, it provides a new understanding of this encounter. Jesus is speaking to, but also beyond Thomas, to the future generations, including you and me. We know that John wrote this gospel long after Jesus had died, so his readers weren't first-hand witnesses. John's audience was the future church. We are blessed in our faith today if we believe without seeing Jesus.
So why believe? We've not put our fingers in Jesus' side. We've not seen him recently alive from the dead. We never saw him before he died. It's important that the first disciples bear witness to the risen Jesus, but we don't believe in the resurrection simply because they say it happened. We are not just disciples from an inherited faith. God always speaks to us in the present tense. Faith is handed down, but it is not second-hand. So why then does Caravaggio paint Thomas as touching Jesus when the text doesn't actually say this? How else would we recognise which one is Thomas here?
Notice that Christ doesn't have a halo. Caravaggio deliberately does this to emphasize his humanity rather than his divinity as the risen Christ. All the post-resurrection experiences with Christ were real, visible, and accessible through the bodily senses. Caravaggio shows us this by making the resurrection as real as possible in his painting. Christ is not a spirit or ghost, but a complete human being who meets, greets, talks, fishes, blesses, eats, and walks with people after he has died. This is the miracle of miracles.
Caravaggio's skill lies in the detail. See the ripped seam on Thomas's faded clothes and dirty fingernails to stress his poverty and Christ's empathy with the poor. Look at Christ's anatomical perfection compared with the disciples' bulk. Notice the elaborate folds of Christ's shroud-like garment, which could be swaddling or funereal, the womb and the tomb, birth and death in one body. And see the different but equally astonished expressions in the disciples' faces.
Although Thomas has been a very popular art subject since the 5th century, where we have the first icon of him, Caravaggio's painting surpasses every other depiction because he combined human realism and anatomical precision with access to the divine. Out of all Caravaggio's paintings, this one was the most popular, being copied 22 times in his short lifetime.
Now notice the Gothic-style archway formed by the outline of the 4 figures compacted into a dark background. Christ's head is largely in shadow, since he is the person who is least knowable to us humans, the viewers. Thomas shows profound surprise as his index finger delves into Jesus' wound. He appears to clutch his side as if he's also become aware of a wound at his side. But who are the other disciples? The disciple at the head of this cluster is probably St. Peter, who becomes the head of the church.
The disciple crouching to our centre right is probably John, the beloved disciple. Dressed in a sacrificial red robe, this is the same John in another Caravaggio painting of this period. Caravaggio knew that John would be especially interested in seeing the wound in Jesus' side, since the wound is near to Jesus' chest where John lovingly had placed his head at the Last Supper. Within the shadows of Christ's face, Caravaggio has tucked Jesus' hair behind his ear so that we also can see his face, and we see Christ's poignant, tender gaze at his own body.
It is very rare in art to see a painting where Jesus is looking at himself. Both John's Gospel and Caravaggio offer us a gentle Christ as he guides Thomas's right hand to touch his wound. Jesus is gentle, but the disciples have appalling manners. Their curiosity is undisguised. They are theologically and physically gobsmacked, each frowning with intense concentration, and no restraint as they continue staring at Jesus' wounds. Nor do they seem to be in any hurry to stop gawping at Jesus. But then this is no ordinary event, is it?
This is a moment of self-revelation on Christ's part, and of revelation of self on the disciples' part. To realize the unrealizable, to bring this miracle within the immediate grasp and understanding of everyone, is the genius of both John's Gospel and Caravaggio. We weren't there, but we can be sure from this text and this painting that the resurrection was and is real.
So our final response to Jesus' beatitude might be, "Blessed are those who doubt, for they shall be surprised." May it be so.